my privilege to welcome the next guest today to deliver our second keynote address. She's not just a critically acclaimed actress, but also a hugely successful commercial star at the box office. She's won multiple awards for her performance in hits like Tanu Weds Manu, Rajana, Prem Ratan Dhan Payo, Veere Di Wedding, Anarkali of Ara, among others. More recently, she's creating waves with her new series on Netflix, Bhag Beanie Bhag. If you haven't watched it yet, please do. It is absolutely outstanding. Before she came to make her mark in the Hindi film industry, she received a bachelor's degree in English literature from the Miranda House and a master's in sociology from JNU. She's also one of the most vocal celebrities on issues of human rights and student activism. In her foreword to Rajdeep Sardesai's latest book, Inqilab, A Decade of Protest, she writes, "To keep at it with our dissent and our protest is a sign that our humanity is alive." Indeed, very well said. Today, she is here to speak to us about the emerging role of students in shaping the new world order. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Swara Bhasker. Thank you, Swara, so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rehan. And I must begin by acknowledging what a huge honor it is to be here today at the Sir Syed Global Scholar Awards Convention 2020 with all these very, very eminent and august people, teachers. I think people who have not just got a lot of recognition and honor, but also people who have had like a tremendous influence on generations of young Indians, people like me. There people here that we have studied, that we have whose papers we've read, and so you will forgive me if I am absolutely terrified, because allow me to start with a disclaimer, which is that I actually have no business being here, and I must. Wherever there is a situation like this where an undeserving person gets a platform and a spotlight, we must thank Bollywood for this honor, because as I said, I have no business sharing a stage, even a virtual one, with a Nobel laureate and the vice chancellor of one of India's most eminent universities, and so many other uh, very esteemed people. And interestingly, an audience which I am sure where 100% of the attendees are more qualified and more educated than I am. But if there's anything we learn from world history, from lived experience, and from emerging global orders, it is that life is not fair. So here I am, undeserving, but because I'm an actor, not underconfident. Um, of course, the real reason I'm here is because Rehan lost a truth and dare bet, and thought, what are the ways in which he can sort of put his citizenship at further risk. Rehan? No. I'm just joking. I asked Rehan what he would want me to speak about, and he suggested the emerging role of students in shaping the world order. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a lot of big verbs over there right away: emerging, shaping, lots of big structural concepts like world order. I don't know why the Honorable Nobel laureate did not speak about this, about the world order, and then why it came to an half-educated Bollywood star. But it got me thinking about really what, when we say world order, what comes to mind? And what came to my mind was a mess, a huge mess, because I think that everywhere in the world today you have basically a tussle. And this is not to say that that has not been the case with the world in general always. Marx told us that where the history is a history of class struggle and so on. So we all know those concepts, but I think that we live in a time when that tussle, when that chaos, when that mess is so spotlighted because we have the technology and the means to have eyes everywhere at all times. So I think that there is a way in which our generation feels the chaos of the world more strongly than perhaps other generations before us did. I think this is the organizers. A lot of them are in North America. So I'll just start with talking about what's happening in the U.S., where for the last many years we have witnessed this unabated spate of police brutalities against Black people, something that would give everyone cause for deep despair. And yet, at the same time, that is precisely what has led to the emergence of, I think, one of the most special solidarity movements of our time, movements for social justice. And I'm, of course, talking about the Black Lives Matter. And this is a movement that has actually ended up playing arguably a fairly critical role in something as huge as the American general election. If you speak about mobilization and you speak about the kind of change of in public discourse that it has led to, and yet 72 million people still voted for Trump. And I don't have an American visa and I have no plans of coming to the US. So I can say that that means to me, I read that as 72 million people voted for racism, for bigotry, and for hate. So it's a weird time, and this is something that is happening actually everywhere in the world. The story of cynical despair, and yet emerging hope. We live in a world where pretty much across the globe there are democratic governments, governments that have the mandate of the people, that are turning towards majoritarian populism, towards normalization of hate and discrimination, where they're indulging in the abuse of institutional structures. And again, uh, it seems legitimate because these are all governments that have the mandate of the people. And this is happening from Turkey to Poland to South America and India to khair, as many of you would say, mashallah. हमारे देश ने तो मेस को जन्म दिया है. हम सब ने मेस में जन्म लिया है. So I think that in India we don't even have to think of examples. I think that we are constantly sort of swinging between despair and hope, and cynicism and a sense of agency constantly. So in this context, I want to actually think about this topic, this idea of the emerging role of students in shaping the world order in a different way. I want to ask all the students who are here today, um, uh, how, and I also want to ask the teachers actually, and this is something where I'm going to go off on a limb and I'm perhaps going to be a little provocative, and I'm hoping that all of y'all will forgive me, and it will not end in with any contempt of court cases on anybody. I want to frame this topic differently. I want to ask, how do you, or how do we as young educated people become relevant players in the huge mess that is the world order, or the importance of the student as a disruptor? And I think that I'm going to speak in the context of India. There I will be making generalizations. These are not going to stand ground in a legal court. It's more really to provoke some kind of a different kind of thinking, because I know that there are a lot of students here who are stepping out of the familiar surroundings of their university, going into new universities. There's a lot of students here who will be stepping into the workforce. There are a lot of students here who would have been involved in what has been happening in India in the last 2 years. And there's a lot of teachers here who must be sick of the students. And I hope the Honorable Vice Chairperson, Vice Chairman of AMU is no longer here. Because I don't want him to think that I am in any way trying to provoke any kind of unrest. Why I'm talking about disruption is because today is the 19th of December. It is the 1 year anniversary of the nationwide protests against CAA NRC laws in India. Today was the day when in a lot of cities protests happened. These protests became a nationwide movement. But why I'm really talking about that is because these protests began with student mobilization. They had widespread student participation, and they continued to have that student participation throughout the time that movement went on. And a very, very significant portion of the resistance to the CAA NRC project on the ground, on the streets, in peaceful manner, also in public discourse, in the media, came from what students were saying. The art students were making, the song students were singing, the poster students were making. Um, and if you look at the kind of crackdown that took place on the students, especially of Jamia and AMU, but also to a certain degree DU and JNU, I think that whether we have or not, the state certainly has recognized the emerging role of students in shaping resistance to government diktat. Uh, I'm mentioning all of this because the more I think of it, the more, and I'm saying at the level of ideas, the more I'm convinced that the greatest value and the abiding relevance of students to a society is in their role as disruptors. If we were to think of the world order in the classic or the classic world order in terms of a classroom, then the student is of most value as the errant backbencher. That student who's sitting in the back and constantly disrupting the uninspired hand-me-down lecture of teachers with irreverent comments. None of those teachers are here. I'm. This is in no way a comment at teachers over here. I'm just again saying at the level of ideas. And please don't get me wrong. I am not in any way trying to suggest that this disruption should be violent in any way, should be physically violent. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that it is a disruption of it is a disruption at the level of ideas. It is the disruption of a normalized hierarchy. What I'm saying is that the student is relevant as a force of change as long as she disrupts accepted, normalized, status quoist hierarchy and power structures. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when students become completely subservient to structures of power that they exist within and that all of us exist within, the student basically becomes invisible. Alternatively, if the student chooses to side actively with power and become an agent of that power structure, what ends up happening is that they basically lose their own identity and become tools of the agenda of that power structure. And that power structure could be anything. What comes obviously to my mind, because it happened again just last year, and the example of that, the example of students choosing to become agents of power structure is nowhere better I think seen than in what has happened to the ABVP, which is a student organization that actually has had a history of standing up for the rights of students and for leading movements for the rights of students. I can think of the time when Lalu Prasad Yadav was in power in Bihar. The ABVP was very actively involved in student movements at that time, arguing for student rights. And if you look at its role now, especially in the last few years, I'm really sorry if there are any ABVP members here, but it has become reduced to a bunch of utter lumpens who are constantly in the news, basically for acts of vandalism and lumpenism. Some of their members are now missing because they have criminal cases of vandalism against them, vandalism of the universe of their own universities. I'm talking about the January 5th attack on JNU. So I think that when I say that students should be wary of becoming active agents of power structures. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And when I say that students are valuable as disruptors, I'm saying as a force that asks questions, as a force that keeps power structures in check, as a force that does not allow power structures to abuse its power. Now, none of this is actually. I think that when we talk about this, we should all. It came to my mind that we must remember that actually, and I'm talking for young Indian students, because I'm assuming that that is what most of this audience or all of this audience comprises of. Nothing in our homes or in our upbringing or in our traditional educational structures actually prepares us for this role, really. Okay. And I'm again not speaking of any individual culture, not speaking of an individual family, not speaking in specific senses, but I think we would all agree that the kind of upbringing culturally we receive in South Asia, especially, or in any society that is traditional, where the family structure is very important, that also is basically feudal in its values still. Whatever our laws, whatever rights our law may give us, but our values are very overwhelmingly feudal and patriarchal. There's actually nothing in what we learn as young children growing up that prepares us to be responsible, peaceful, disruptors at the level of ideas, because our values, boys receive values of, being strong, not crying, being breadwinners, being responsible, taking care of their parents, being the earners, and that whole weight of, and then of course being raja betas. And girls are basically receiving a value system that is basically preparing them for a life of service and duty to everyone else except themselves. Largely speaking, this is really what traditional value systems are. Young children, this is what we are learning. Then we come to schools where, again, unless we are blessed with good teachers, and I know there are many of them in India, I've been blessed to have many of them, there are many of them here, but still an overwhelming majority in terms of how our educational system is structured is basically we're teaching children to obey and to memorize and to learn by rote and to not ask unnecessary questions. All of us have been through school, and some teachers told us, please sit down and don't ask unnecessary questions. Please don't interrupt unnecessarily. This word, unnecessary, is a word that in whichever language you have studied in, you have heard this in your classroom when you have when you have asked too many questions. We're not learning it in school. You're not going to learn it from traditional religious or more traditional kind of learning, which is odd actually, because almost all the great figures of the religions of our world, almost all the great prophets were basically disruptors in their own right. So it's interesting actually that institutionalized religion will always sort of cover this up, but we still get that lesson from a variety of other places, and that is from folk poetry, from folk art, from the non-conventional, non-institutionalized movements of spirituality and faith, whether it was the Sufi poets or it was the Bhakti poets. You learn that the value of that disruption from literature, from stories, from a mythology. uh, uh, you learn that lesson most instinctively from the human tendency and need, and what I would like to believe is the most redeeming quality of us as a human race, which is our ability to be kind and empathetic. uh, I think that what young people in India need to think about is to think about how are we putting our education and our privilege to have had education in a country where a lot of people don't. How are we putting that education to use to becoming relevant in a world where there are all kinds of hierarchies, many of which are unfair, where on a daily basis we will be faced with situations where power structures will show their most venal side, and where oftentimes even governments that are democratically elected, whose job is to govern on the basis of a constitution which oftentimes in many countries would guarantee as much equality as possible in that framework, when those governments themselves sort of abandon that mandate, how then does a young person respond? And I would submit that whatever we do, we must not respond with indifference, and we must not respond with turning our face away, because then you are then all of us are basically we're spitting on our education. We're reducing our education to a piece of paper that will give us a wage. We're reducing our education to its most, frankly, base and irrelevant purpose, which is to put that monthly salary in our banks. And unfortunately, it is how we live and we eat, but actually that is not the purpose of our education, and that is not an attitude that is going to help young people in any way be relevant to anything or any society where they then exist. uh, when I say disruption, I don't mean to suggest that we must all be leading protests and against the companies where we work, or that we must all right now pick up placards and move towards the administration of building of whichever universities where we are studying, or any such thing. What I mean is that when we are walking down the corridors of the offices where we are employed and we see a janitor being mistreated, I hope that that our education serves the purpose of making us stop over there and intervening. I hope that when we are traveling in a public transport and we see an act of hate crime taking place between us, however mild it may be, that our education and whatever we have learned as literate people, I hope that that education makes us step up and intervene in that situation. And I want to, I mean, some of this stuff sounds very dramatic when we speak about it, but I want to remind everyone here that that young man Muhammad Junaid, who was 15 years old, who got lynched in India in 2017, I think, outside of Delhi on a train in a compartment. There must have been at least 200 other people in that compartment. No one said no. No one said stop. So what I mean is that when we assume that our job as good citizens, or our job as students or as young people, is to pick up our belongings and quickly rush away to safety, when that becomes the purpose of our education, then we are basically participating in a situation where accountability from society will disappear. And again, I say that it sounds dramatic, but let me remind all of us again that literally in India we are seeing a rise of, everywhere in the world, but definitely in India, we are seeing a rise in crimes where public participation has gone up in a manner that is absolutely alarming, whether it is Una, whether it is Raj Samand, where a man was burnt alive, uh, whether it is Kathua, whether it is Hathras. So I think that when we think about what is the value of students, we must think of students as people who are invested in the ideals and in the values of the education that we are chartering from our books. uh, I think that uh, And I think that it's happening already. It's not like it's not happening, it's happening all around us. I spoke about the participation of the students in the CANRC protests. It's we As we speak, there is a farmers protest that is going on while we speak, and I went there the other day, and I was so struck by the manner in which the young people and the children of these farmers, these young people who have now had to prove that they are educated because of a sort of a very sort of organized media campaign against farmers. It's so inspiring to see these young people trying to shape and engage in what is their own reality. um, there are hilarious instances of how students have acted as disruptors, and I just want to share a very actually sweet incident from not sweet, it's actually funny incident from JNU last year, where there has been sort of this standoff on the issue of fees. And final the students have been trying to meet had been trying to meet the VC of JNU for many, many months, and he had not been meeting them. And finally, as an act of a sort of intervention, disruption, protest, you can identify it as you will. A group of the students went to the Vasant Vihar Police Thana and lodged a missing persons complaint, saying that the VC is missing. We have not been able to locate him. We are very worried for his safety. And could you please help us find the VC, because we need desperately to talk to him. Nothing violent, totally responsible, totally within the legal framework, and yet holding those in power accountable to what their job and responsibility is. I want to just end very quickly by saying that these are not concepts that are sort of limited to Zoom webinars and to uh, memes on Instagram. The job of being a principled disruptor, and let's coin that term, the job of being a principled disruptor. And let me tell you that there are many very, very famous and esteemed greats who were principled disruptors. Perhaps for us the most relevant and the greatest is actually Gandhiji. But I think that the job of a principled disruptor is constant. It starts everywhere. uh, and I would like to end by sort of pointing to the most sort of intimate and unfortunate example of normalization of uh, discrimination that is plaguing India today, which is the WhatsApp group message of the family group. And the kind of utter nonsense, fake news, rumors, frankly, misinformation, and sometimes stuff that is actually criminally liable that we receive on a daily basis on these WhatsApp groups. And most of us, because we are good children, and this is a point I've made before and gotten into some trouble for, but I will say it again, most of us, because we are good children, we have all been taught good manners by our parents, we all are sanskari bachas, we don't disrupt that conversation. We don't ask our elders, why are you saying this? Because it's not part of our culture, it's not part of good breeding, it's not good etiquette. But I think that if there's any place where we must start uh, to take principled positions, to where we must begin by valuing the lessons and the education that we have had the privilege of learning, it is to start at home. Because at this point in our country, every other home is participating in what will become and what has already led to so much uh, anarchy, so much violence, so much tearing of the social fabric of this country. And that is the normalization of bigotry, of hate, of discrimination. And I'm not pointing fingers to any particular community. I'm not pointing fingers to a particular set of people, because frankly it's happening across the board. So I just want to leave and stop rambling with this thought that the next time you the next time you are in a situation where in the given power structure you can see an abuse of power, however mild, that is taking place in front of you, don't turn your face away. Don't turn your face away, even if it means getting into trouble with your parents, with your teacher, with your boss. um, and I mean, unless you're going to starve and get thrown out of the job, or lose your citizenship, I don't suggest that anyone sort of risks their personal safety. But there are ways to challenge the abuse of power without laying yourself in the line of fire. We don't even do that because we are trained not to. So let's put our education to first untraining that training, and actually use the real purpose of education for what it is, which is to, somebody talked about sending the lift down again, which is to participating in society and making a change for the better. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Swara. I mean, that was incredibly powerful, and I can't tell you a bit. We've been getting messages and questions coming in from social media, from chat, and it's just exploding right now. And everyone has just so much to say. I mean, incredible, powerful words. Thank you so much. It's impossible to do justice to what you said, but I'm just trying to think about all the themes that you hit and how relevant. The fact that how you turned it on the head of students and said, how do educated people become principal disruptors? And I think your point about not being taught in school to ask questions, not being taught in school to really question normalized hierarchy as you described it. The first question I have coming in from the audience is, do you think there's too much focus on science, technology, engineering, medicine? Is it time for students to start thinking about a political career as a career option? Is politics a career option to become that principal disruptor?
Well, you're speaking to a liberal arts student who failed in science in class 9 and in math at a later stage. So I'm not a particularly, but I passed in the end. I just want to put that out there. But I actually think that two things very quickly, Rehan. One, that I think that in India especially, there is a huge misconception of what politics is. The moment we say politics, we immediately only think of electoral politics. All right. And so everyone, and there is this accepted thing, and I of course come from an industry which is prides itself at being non-political, which is that people are like, no, politics is dirty, and I just keep wanting to turn around and say, yeah, well, politics is also what won us our freedom, guys. Politics is not just the Bihar chunav and the Uttar Pradesh chunav and the whichever MCD chunav and Nagar Nigam chunav. That's not what politics is. Politics is actually is when we engage with the power structures that surround us at all times. Politics is in our own houses when our dad comes home and only the daughter is expected to get up and go and give bring water or bring chai, but the son never gets up. And this is not to say that that we should not serve our fathers and uncles and elders tea or chai or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that politics actually is everywhere, because politics is basically an engagement and the relationship between people in structures of hierarchy and power. So that's one. Secondly, I don't think it's, I agree with you when you say that are we, I think what happens is that we think of education in only in terms of degrees. So everything is compartmentalized. So if you're studying engineering, then you are only sort of in your engineering books. When you're doing your MBA, you're only in your whatever CAT exam, medicine, whatever, everything else, biology. And actually it is very, very easy to go through a degree focusing only on your field and knowing nothing else about what is happening around you, so that you go into a movie hall, you watch a Padmavat or a Tanha ji, and you're like, oh, Musalman to bahut kharab the, haan, unhone kitna ganda kaam kiya, because you have your nothing in your degree has made you realize that there is a difference between historical fiction, between the fictionalization of history, between a historical film, between a documentary, and between recorded history. So what I'm saying is that I completely agree with you that education, when we talk about education, at the very, from the primary school level right through your higher education, we just have to have a more composite approach. And I'm really sorry to say this, but frankly, all you engineers and all you doctors and all you like science kids out there, you really need to start like reading the newspapers. You need to have some idea of also of not, don't believe, firstly get off Quora. Okay, that is not where you're getting any accurate information from. And please, use all your scientific temperament to, apart from learning formulas, also check what is the background of the website that you are reading. Just understand, just read 3 4 other articles that are published on the website, so you get a larger picture of our society. I think what, and this is actually, it's very relevant that you asked this, because this is precisely why education is such an area of conflict, especially in India. Why is it that every government that comes to power tries to rewrite history, especially governments that come with ideological agendas? Why is Indian history such an, it's a battlefield? Why is the teaching of a history, why are history textbooks like these battlefields where like subjects are being pulled out and characters are being removed and other people are being put inside? It's precisely because of this, because the social sciences and the liberal arts and history is what actually contributes so deeply to our everyday beliefs, to our everyday common sense, to our everyday biases and prejudices. So I absolutely agree with you that we need to have a more composite approach to education. And I'm really sorry, but all you engineering boys and girls and medicine, and I know you guys work very hard, I know you go for lots of tuitions, you have tough exams to take, please start reading the newspaper.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was really good. We'll start picking up some papers. I have one final question for you very quickly. And the reason I'm asking this is because it's come through from multiple different people in multiple different ways. So very quickly, you're fearless. You speak your mind, and you speak your mind without, any care in the world, which is amazing. The question people are asking and students want to know, how do you balance that fine line between, speaking your mind and progressing and not, risking your professional life and personal life? If you can just very quickly speak to some students on that and give them some confidence to do that.
Okay, so firstly, I'm not fearless. Most of the times, I am in a state of constant anxiety and panic as to what is the fresh trouble that I have gotten into and what will be the fallout of what it is that I have done. My parents are poor things. I think I have turned both my parents' entire heads white with worry, because they are constantly, because they're like, how can this be a real thing कि हमें ये डर लग रहा है कि हमारी बेटी जेल जा सकती है. मतलब हम ऐसे respectable government servants हैं, like how is this a real fear for us? But jokes aside, I think that again, I just have to firstly just confess that there is no credit to me for the fact that I'm fearless. It is completely for two reasons. One, that my parents, from my very childhood, gave me the greatest gift that any parents can give to their children, which is to make the child believe that whatever happens to you, we are right here. You can always come home. It doesn't matter what happens. We will be there for you. This house will be there. Our doors will be open for you. And I think that it seems, again, dramatic, but when you go out into the real world, into the adult world, and you're, basically just dying because there are so many like mad choices that you have to make, and you're hit in the face with so many things you didn't even know about, just to know that you have someplace to go home to, it just gives you a kind of, that is actually where my fearlessness comes from. That's one. Two, I think the fact that I'm educated, The fact that I am not that I have, because I have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, I feel like I can get a job however bad the economy is and however high berozgari is in the last 45 years. But I at least when I came to Bombay 10 years ago, I knew that I was employable in some way or the other. So I knew that I could earn a living even if this crazy dream of Bollywood dream of mine didn't work out. So that gave me a confidence to basically say no, because and not do things that I didn't want to do, and that could be anything. The third thing really is, and I would say this to everyone, is that look, we're taught to be scared because it's again, fear is one of the most basic tactics of control. Parents do it to children, religion does it to its devotees, institutionalized religion does it to its devotees, governments do it to citizens. So fear is basically a tool of social control, and social control is important in some sense because you want to have a civilized society. But fear is not a good emotion to base your decisions on. Nothing good can come from fear. And I'll say this as an actor because we work with the body and I'm trained as a dancer. Do you know that how we show fear, what is the body language for fear as per the Natya Shastra or as per the traditional understanding of how emotions are emoted? I'm sorry I'm doing this, but so every time I'm in pajamas, sorry about that. But every time you have to show fear, this is what you do. You crouch, you close yourself in. Every classical dance form which shows fear will show fear like this. Anytime you watch a film, you see how actors act when they're scared. It's all about just turning into nothing. It's making yourself invisible, just crumpling. That is the exact opposite of what growth is, because anything that should take you forward should be something that allows you to spread, to grow, to open up. So for me, fear is just the worst thing to take a decision on. It's a good reason not to commit a crime, but it's the worst emotion to take a life decision on. So I would just say to everyone out there, problematize fear. Just problematize the notion of fear, and then you will, I think, be liberated from a lot of what plagues us and doesn't allow us to come to clear decisions basically. So that's really how I approach this whole issue. And frankly, as far as the fine balance between damages that you have to pay and between the rewards that we seek, I think that if you are operating from a place of conviction, then you will be willing to bear a few losses. And I just want to say that I'm not the only person in this place. The people who've taken stands are not the only people in their place. People have paid a price, and sometimes very extreme, from the time of Socrates. Okay, and of course, I'm not suggesting that any of us drink poison, but just again, throwing two names: Muhammad Ali, the world's greatest boxer. He, at the height of his career, was banned for 3.5 years from boxing because he refused to be drafted into the American military and participate in the Vietnam War, because he saw it. He was a principal disruptor. He said, I have not, why should I participate in the killing of Vietnamese people? They did no wrong to me. And he turned the whole question upon American society by talking about racism. He never recovered his form when he came back. But how do we remember him today? We still remember him as the greatest boxer in the world. Second example, closer home, Majroo Sultanpuri ji. Majroo Sultanpuri Saab spent a year and a half, I think 11 months or 1 year and 11 months, I can't remember, in jail in Bombay for a nazm that he wrote against Nehru, because he was criticizing at some mill workers event, he was criticizing Nehru's actually NAM policy, because he felt that Nehru was ignoring farmers and, too involved in like foreign trips. Um, so he wrote this poem, and which ended actually with a very provocative line, which was "Maar le saathi jaane na paaye." And the then governor of Bombay told him to apologize, and he said, "I will not." They slapped him with a sedition case and jailed him. And Raj Kapoor and Balraj Sahni Saab and so many people kept coming to Majroo Saab and saying, "Please apologize, bol do yaar sorry, bol do yaar sorry," and he refused. And he stayed in jail for 11 months. I know this because Majroo Saab's son told me the story. Raj Kapoor would send monthly stipend to the family because there was nobody earning with Majroo Saab in jail. And when Majroo Saab came back, work resumed as normal. And today we remember Majroo Saab for those amazing songs that he has written. And this only adds to, frankly, his integrity as an artist. So I think that we should also stop looking at, oh my god, I'll get a scolding from my mother, from my teacher, I'll get thrown out of class, I'll get a show cause notice, I might be suspended for a few days, I might get in trouble with my boss. Life is very long and history is even longer. So I think that sometimes that's also a good way to look at things.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome, and spoken so eloquently like a true artist. So really appreciate your time with us, Swara. Thank you so much for sharing your words. I think it was really very inspiring, and we are hoping to stay engaged with you and with leaders of youth activism, so we can continue to work together to build and nurture leaders for our society tomorrow.
Thank
So
you.
thank you again for your time.
Thank
And
you. And
I
to all
will.
the teachers who were on this panel, I hope I didn't say anything offensive. I have the greatest respect. My mother is a teacher, and I think that I have been blessed with some very good teachers who were themselves principal disruptors in their own places and in their own time. And I'm sure all of you have had a very, very foundational effect on the
Hmm.
students who have been blessed to have learned from you all.
I
Thank you.
echo your words. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so